Tory Lanez talking about what Antoine was asking about. He gets denied a new trial, and then he's over here telling the black judge, "Oh, I could be your son," or whatever the case may be. While he had Jose Baez, shout out to Jose Baez for taking that case. People, I know Jose's phone be ringing because people be like, you know what? He got Casey Anthony off. I'm gonna call Jose.
I don't understand honestly the whole look. And you know what's funny is though, if Tory Lanez says, you know, I could be your son, you're right, you could be, but you're not. And I also think that you did some things.
One of them rough judges.
Yeah, my son ain't shooting women.
But like,
yeah, I mean, we not, yeah, but you're not, bro. Like, I mean, we could be a lot of things, but we not. And I think that what he should have been, I think what he should have been was actually somebody that was a decent human being, right? And knowing that I'm gonna pull a gun on somebody and think you telling a joke, and then by you telling a joke, somebody is harmed and a community is harmed, and then you think you're gonna walk away from it like scot-free. I just don't understand in what world you think that that's actually a thing. So I don't know. For folks out there still supporting Tory,
he thinks that it's a thing because you know the victim of the crime was a black woman, and so therefore he's like, "What's the big deal? I don't get it." Because
I'm a black man, it's a black woman. You know what I'm saying? It's all family. I should just be let go. Like, no, bro, you got to sit down.
Well, I mean, he knew that based on the intersectionality of the victim, Meg the Stallion, that the court of public opinion would throw her under the bus way before they even looked at any evidence or knew anything. He was like, well, what Megan doing there? And is she sleeping with him? And is da-da-da-da-da, as opposed to, wait, she got shot.
You think so?
Got injuries. You think so? What? That happened in real time.
I gotta disagree with you. I gotta disagree with you on that one.
People are really doubting her story and saying like it's something else.
Well, before they ever even went to trial, I seen her doing an interview with Gayle King.
Correct.
Right? Like,
and what did she say?
Well, here's the thing though. You know, after she did the interview with Gayle King for Tory Lanez, it was guilty until proven innocent. And so when you start to have the conversation and you look at it holistically, right? Because what it was that came out during a trial was completely different than what it is that she communicated to Gayle King, right? She volunteered the information. When Gayle asked her the question and said, yo, did y'all even have any kind of sexual relationship? She said no. And then her story changed, right? And so
that's not a volunteer though.
Well, but here's the thing. No, it is a volunteer because she can choose not to answer the question. She wasn't on trial, right? This was a voluntary interview that she didn't have to show up for. So when you start to have that conversation and you say the court of public opinion prior to her actually going, you know, the trial actually, you know, coming to fruition.
The reason why she went to the court of public opinion is because Tory was releasing songs. He was releasing songs addressing the facts of the case. And she was like, hold on. And to me, the part of the story that always gets lost, Megan's story that gets lost, aside from the fact that she got shot and actually had injuries and went to the hospital and was treated for a gunshot wound, aside from that, which is probably the most important part, she says, hey, when the incident first happened, because it was in the thick of the George Floyd protests and everything that was going on with black men and police and all this stuff, I lied because I didn't want Tory to be, swept up in that. I was protecting a black
I don't believe her.
Okay.
I don't believe her even a little bit. Because here's the thing. A lie is a lie. A lie is a lie is a lie, right?
Listen,
and so when I have to hear somebody say that they lied, it then starts to, for me, it feeds into the credibility of how do I know what you're telling the truth about and what you're lying about, right? Because for me, I try to be objective enough to remove my opinion about what I feel about Tory and whether I like his music or not, or what I feel about Meg and whether or not I like her music or not. I then start to subconsciously, even if somebody in real life, right? If somebody in real life come in and they say, okay, I did X. And then tomorrow they say, you know what, but it was really Y. And the only reason that they telling me that is Y is because I caught them in a lie of X. Then I have to start questioning every single thing that happened prior to that. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, what else did they lie about? because the credibility
well,
of
the problem is at the end of the day, she actually had an injury. So it's one thing if you want to say how steps in the process were inaccurate, but the problem is she really got shot.
No, I feel you on that.
So the issue is she really has an injury. She really is a victim of a crime. And she's telling her story as a victim of a crime. She's saying, look, I didn't want him to get in trouble. I wasn't even trying to do all this and have to come to Gayle King and have to go before the public and
it's a problem.
Involve my career. I wasn't trying to do that. But the reason why she has to do that is because of exactly what happens, which is the victim blaming, the victim shaming, the whatever. She's worrying about that instead of worrying about the fact that she's injured. Her first instinct.
I don't believe that. I don't believe it.
I don't want to cause drama for my career. I don't want my career to go down. I don't want to have all these problems. So I have to create some sort of narrative around what happened to me, as opposed to I'm gonna just say whatever happened and it is what it is, because I know that I'm going to be supported regardless.
I don't like that. And the reason why I don't like it is because too often we see men on a regular basis. I think men are the biggest victims, largely with regard to how it is that we've empowered women and just said, believe all women inherently without any evidence. Like I'll give you an example. If you take the Duke lacrosse team, they lost everything, right? Just from a woman accusing them and then coming back and saying, okay, I lied, but everything, their reputation was ruined, their lives was ruined, their scholarships was taken, everything was upended, right? If you look at, there's a recent paternity test, right, over in Detroit, where a woman basically is lying on a guy, and the only reason that they determined that she lied is because she had to come in and take a DNA test in order to prove that the child actually wasn't the guy's. Now, this guy said he's never met her before, right? She literally just named him. He's married. You don't know what was happening in his household. His check was about to start being garnished, right? And every day we see guys getting released from prison now that we have the technology in order to go back and determine whether or not some of these guys actually committed the crimes that they were accused of. And these are laws that are advocated against as far as updated, even in the family court laws that were established decades and decades ago, that guys are being railroaded for. And then at the end of the conversation, we don't hold women accountable for the lies that they told in order to protect their reputation that they then threw the guy under the bus for. And so I think that the victims are really the guys, because inherently what we see happening is saying that the Me Too movement is cool, believe all women inherently, but then we don't even question, and it's guilty until proven innocent, especially in a time in which we live in social media, because you're already
it literally was not guilty until proven innocent. It literally,
but it's not just men, right?
It literally was like free Tory from the jump, and still is apparently. But
because our legal system is supposed to be set up to where you are supposed to be getting a trial. And it is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty.
And he was convicted.
But he was already convicted in a court of public opinion way before he hit the trial. And the worst part about social media today and the times in which we live in is that nothing is hidden anymore. And so everybody is influenced before you ever even hit the courtroom, including all of the jurors, because they're influenced by what's happening in society.
Simone, what you gonna say?
Yeah. I wanted to add something that's important also for like the viewers to consider, which is that, yes, Megan lied when she said they had never had a sexual relationship. However, what's important to note is that she didn't lie on the stand. She didn't perjure herself. So as we're thinking about, well, what did the jury hear and how did the jury come to this conclusion? You have to recognize that the jury heard her say, yes, I was messing with my best friend's man. And she did admit that. So while we see that as liars, I'm just saying jurors may have processed that differently.
Yeah, because trust me, I've tried hundreds of jury trials, and the only thing Black people do when they come to jury duty is try to go home. and it's very irritating to me. I cannot say as an attorney, hey guys, we need you here because you have the life experience and to help us resolve this case between Ray Ray and Pookie. So can you please hang out? No, I can't do that. But I choose juries a lot, and Black people self-eliminate themselves. They say they got to go home. They got to take they need a diabetes medicine. They cannot be on the jury because they got to take care of these kids. I'm a teacher. I'll be in testing. I cannot be on the jury. And it boggles my mind because these are the same people who complain about the results of cases. They'll be like, oh, how come this person got locked up for 40 years and now they letting him out? And they knew it's like, because no one who had your life experience was looking at the facts of the case and was a judge of the facts, because during jury selection, you said that you needed to leave because your sugar was raised or you needed to do something else other than be there for your brother or your sister that you're now complaining, is locked up. So the jury thing is very sensitive.
Do you think that people are biased?
Because I constantly have to deal with Black people, African Americans sitting on jury panels and saying God told them they can't sit on a jury because of their religion. They can't judge other people when they're not judging anyone. They're judging facts of a case. So it has nothing to do with your religion. But
do you think that people are inherently biased?
So the people who are in the court of public opinion, the loudest, will never be on the jury anyway.
Do you think that people are inherently biased?
Of course.
All people.
Yeah, of course. That's natural. It's just based on your life experience. But when you're on a jury, what you're asked to do is put your bias aside and review the facts of the case and decide whether or not the facts of the case fit and whether or not the prosecutor has proven whatever they have to prove, whatever the crime is.
I think that as great as our legal system is compared to other countries, I think that our legal system is inherently flawed, because I don't think that even though you can ask somebody to put away their bias, it's impossible. It's literally an impossible task to ask somebody to unprogram themselves and look at something objectively in order to determine the fate of another human being. I don't think it's possible. I don't think anybody can remove their bias.
I agree with you in terms of the flaws, because nothing's perfect, especially when it involves humans, right? Because if we wanted the system to be perfect, we would just get AI, we would put the facts into the machine and then see if it pops out guilty or innocent. But that's not what we have. We have a system where you're supposed to be judged by a jury of your peers. And Correct. The issue is, most of the time at the defense table, it is a person of color. And unfortunately, most of the time, the people in the jury are not actually their peers. They have no idea. They never been in the situations they've been in. They've never had to hustle for anything. They have no idea what their life experience is about. So they're judging facts and applying them to the law and not able to bridge the gap that you're talking about, the human experience. They're not able to do that because they don't understand anything about the person. They don't have the bias. So I think that
but here's the problem though.
I always say in jury selection, we're not asking you to strip away your humanity and become a computer. Your life experience is exactly what makes you valuable as a juror. You just have to be honest with the attorneys when they say, is your life experience going to stop you from being able to look at the facts objectively and look at the law objectively?
I think that your life experience is what makes you flawed, though. I think that's exactly what makes you flawed. Because I'll give you an example. Why did you become a lawyer?
To be a social engineer.
Social engineer in what way?
To be at the forefront of progress for our society, for equality, for people to be treated fairly, things like that.
Specifically for Black people, though, right?
I think it was based on my experience as a Black person, but I represent people so that
you can't remove the bias that you have in favor of Black people.
What happened?
So you can't remove the bias that you have in favor of Black people, because that is one of the inherent reasons why you became a lawyer.
That I have bias in favor of Black people?
Correct. Because you want equality, right? Equality is because you see a gap based off of your life experiences or the things that you see on a regular basis between what you think is fair and unfair, specifically with related to people of color, correct?
Right.
So inherently, you are biased, and we all are in one way, shape, or another, right? If I grew up, because the problem with people is that nobody truly knows who this person is, even though we're selecting them and we saying that they're a jury of our peers. Nobody is really a jury of your peers, right? Simply because I don't know if that person grew up and his mother was getting her ass kicked by his father or
but you would know. But you would know. That's the entire purpose of voir dire. That's the purpose of it. You are getting to those questions. You are asking about
but that's
the person's
assuming
life
that people are honest, and people are not honest. Right? They're
Hey,
not
Anton, I'm gonna tell you.
They're not honest.
Therefore, there, man, you'd be surprised, man. Now, while I say that, not folks, many folks are like totally honest. People are genuinely honest about things. If you ask them straight up questions, I guess I've seen it enough where, like, if somebody says, "Hey, this case is about somebody getting into an accident or whatever like that. Have you been in an accident?" Most folks who got in an accident will say, "I got into an accident." If you say this case is about somebody doing something like that, and you try to, it's almost like an outer to inner limit kind of like line of questioning and like what it, and like usually you can kind of like in some way, shape, form, or fashion drill down, like maybe not to the 100th percentile, but I think like for the majority of it, folks will generally tell you like their life experiences and what they've been to, and the type of biases that they bring to the table. And notwithstanding that, though, that doesn't necessarily mean that you could be kicked off the jury, because as Sue said in the beginning, you're asked at the very end, is this something that can actually affect your decision making process during this trial? And if you answer in the affirmative, yes, it will, or no, it will not, and I can actually go forward without being biased, then we have to take that as true. And I think that a full circle moment back to the Tory Lanez case, though, is that all these cases have their own set of facts, right? And I don't want to get away from the actual set of facts we had in this particular case with Tory Lanez. I think it's undisputable that Tory Lanez was the actual trigger man, right? I think it's undisputable what the three eyewitnesses said that they saw that night. I said, now we can sit up here and talk about what Larry, Curly, and Mo may or may not have seen, but we don't have exculpatory evidence or refuting that testimony. Now, if somebody would have came forward and said, you know what though, Mo over there, that motherfucker, I ain't no way in the world he saw that, because I know it was out and I saw this too. But there was nothing in there really to actually like muddy the waters in this particular case. And it wasn't like Tory Lanez came forward. Bro, his team had, it was the first case I saw where they was just literally throwing stuff at the juror, hoping they actually like kind of like didn't see through the actual like, I guess deflections. But at the end, I think when it boiled down to it, all the public humiliation, all of the quote unquote lying beforehand, I think when they got down to it and the facts were laid out and they lined up to the elements were satisfied.
What makes something a fact?
It was the fact that he was convicted.
Hold on, no. Because you saying that the facts are laid out, but everything that you just said is based off of the opinion or the assumption that all of these people are telling the truth. That's not a fact.
I tell you
that's their perspective. Listen, I see people every single day say their truth. What does that mean? What does it mean to say your truth? That's not a fact. A fact is something that both of us can agree on, can't be changed. And even your perspective of what you think happened is not a fact. It's based off of your perspective and your bias. And then often at times, listen, you can play a game of telephone and you can say a specific phrase and a specific word. And by the time it go around to 10 people, it's going to be completely different by the time that they recommunicate it back to you. Right?
I agree with what you're saying. I agree with the theory of what you're saying. But if the issue is in a jury trial, there's always going to be evidence that's only a eyewitness testimony. So if what you were saying was true and followed through the system, then no one who was robbed or raped or a crime committed against them where there isn't a camera you wouldn't be able to prosecute, because you would be like, well, there's no camera there, so we can't go forward with the case. But you would know, that your grandmother or your mom or your sister or whoever is like, this is what happened to me.
But the problem with that is that
heard. So
I don't believe that anybody should go to jail.
There's always going to be testimonial evidence introduced in a trial, and that's why you have the jury. The jury has to weigh the evidence and say, okay, you know what, she was honest about XYZ, or he was honest about XYZ, or this is how they presented themselves, because they are using their life experience. If you have people on the jury that are teachers, or I always ask if people are parents and they've had to mediate between kids, like who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. I'll always have parents on juries, because they are able to kind of do that navigation, and they understand having to weigh testimonial evidence, because they got to listen to one kid and what one kid said, and then listen to the other kid, and then decide, make a decision. That's what you're doing. It's not kids, but there's always testimonial evidence. And then the idea is that the prosecution, the state, is supposed to have corroborating evidence, other witnesses, video evidence, if it's possible, DNA evidence, if it's possible. But the core of the case is always going to be an accusation. That's always going to be the start. And then there's always going to be testimonial evidence. That's what they're sitting there doing. They're testifying.
But the problem is that testimonial evidence alone should not be the core by which somebody determines whether or not somebody should have to spend their life or even several years paying for something. And this is why we see so many people.
Tory's DNA on the gun? Not that I feel like getting
because,
into Tory's thing.
But see, y'all missing it is because this is bigger than Tory Lanez.
I agree.
The thing that I'm introducing into this conversation is there's factors that we're not considering that is influencing what happens. And one of them is social media, and another one is the court of public opinion, in which we are not trying to add that into the conversation as a factor. And then we're starting to lean on how it is that we've always done things based off of what happened in yesteryear. But it is a factor, and it is a contributing factor. And the fact that we only lean on testimony mainly in order to substantiate whether or not somebody should be convicted is a problem, because I think that testimony should be secondary. As a matter of fact, it should be complementary in addition to the evidence, considering that we have so much technology and we have to take into consideration the court of
Anton, that's very unreasonable. Crimes occur all the time, and there's only eyewitnesses. So
and the problem with that is that people are fallible, and I would never personally ever put somebody in a position to where I would make them go to jail for the rest of their life with the possibility, even a small possibility, that they did not commit the crime, because I see too many people, especially participating with the Innocence Project today, that are being released from prison that didn't even do the crime. And they spending decades and decades in jail. And we see people being thrown under the jail when their life is completely ruined, and we don't have a respawn moment, right? This is not a video game. They don't get a second opportunity to be able to come back and say,
I'm not advocating for wrongful convictions. I'm saying, obviously, I participated in 2 seasons of a show called Wrong Man, where we got people who were saying, people send in letters every day to the firm. I get hundreds and hundreds of letters, people saying I'm innocent, I didn't do it. We review the cases. We reviewed the cases on the show, and we exonerated people on the show. So I don't want anything I'm saying to be construed as me saying I think that the system is perfect and that people are not wrongfully convicted all the time. What I'm saying is that there's always going to be testimonial evidence in a case, that the idea is that the jury is supposed to weigh that testimonial evidence, and the time and the place that it goes down for the attorneys to decide, are these people going to be able to weigh this, is in voir dire, because you're not going to have someone who's the victim of domestic violence, somebody who's had certain experiences in a case where they're dealing with that exact thing, because then they're going to have that bias. And that's what you ask in voir dire. Is this going to affect you? Are you going to be able to look at the facts of the case and judge the facts of the case and apply the law? So that's all I'm saying. Like I said, I absolutely participated in a whole series about wrongful conviction and exonerating people based on touch DNA, which, our generation loves DNA, but it really is, there's a lot of problems with that, based on tool marks and tire marks and footprints and all kinds of things. So I deeply understand things that are improper and wrong in the law. My issue with the particular case that we're talking about with very specific facts are that there's pieces of the story that are overlooked. I'm not saying there weren't people that were Team Megan and people that were Team Tory, or that Tory should go to jail for the 20 years that he's facing. I don't think that either. I think they should honestly be asking Megan, you know, what she thinks. And as a former prosecutor, that's always what I took into the courtroom during sentencing. To the extent that we would get to sentencing, it would be, what does the victim want? And sometimes you have victims that say, listen, you know, I don't think they should go to jail. I think they should be on probation, or I think they should go to therapy, or I think they should have to take anger management, or whatever the case may be. That's always taken into consideration by the judges and the prosecution. And sometimes you have people that say, listen, this person killed my family member. I want them to be under the jail. But I think the victim's thoughts and feelings about the case should be taken into consideration. And I think that people have to consider the fact that there was an injury, and notice there were no cameras inside of the Tory Lanez inside of that trial. So it's we're all functioning and going off of the reports, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying that we didn't actually see what the testimony was and how the jury was perceiving it. So we're getting all of that information in a different way. We're not getting it directly when we're making our judgments about, oh, well, she did this.
So we don't even really know what the facts are then.
What do you mean?
We don't know what the facts are.
You mean what was introduced to the jury?
Listen, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know who was influenced by who. We don't know. Literally, there was a woman that came in, because we're only using testimony from several people, but there was a woman that came in that was allegedly, right, because none of us was actually in the courtroom, that allegedly testified on behalf of Tory Lanez, that completely refuted what Megan said happened, not only what it is that she said happened prior to the case happening in the court of public opinion, but also what she said happened during the trial, right? But we're completely ignoring that part of the conversation in order to substantiate the idea that we think that he did something based off of testimony and no additional evidence to support it. And so what I'm saying is that I don't know whether he did it or not.
How do you feel about the fact that Tory has not testified?
I'm not going to ignore the fact that we all can agree that she's a liar. We know that for a fact, because she had two different stories based off of what it is that she communicated, not only in interviews, but also to the general public. And then what it is that she said on trial in order to not perjure herself. We know for a fact that she's a liar, but we don't know whether or not he really did anything, because none of us actually have any evidence to support that.
If Tory Lanez testified, right, and Tory Lanez was like, listen, I don't know what she's talking about. I was, seated in the passenger side of the vehicle the entire time. I have no idea what she's talking about. Matter of fact, I was asleep when all this happened. If he came and testified and said that to the jury, and then the rest of the facts were as they were saying, in terms of the eyewitnesses saying he's the one who shot the gun, and then the expert witness that came in and said they couldn't say his DNA wasn't on the gun or was on the gun. It couldn't be determined. Then what? Then what do you do? Because it's the same thing you're saying, because now Tory's testifying on his own behalf. It's only testimonial evidence. So do you say, okay, well, we believe Tory?
I don't think that anybody should be convicted without 100% being sure that this is exactly what happened. I think that anytime that you have a question mark, we have to do better as a society, or somehow, some way do better as a justice system, to actually be able to substantiate whether or not this is true or not. And I don't know if it takes more time in order to find more evidence. I don't know what that looks like. But I know one thing: I don't like people going to jail. And this is, for me, this isn't about Tory Lanez. This is about everybody that doesn't even have the visibility that Tory Lanez has. This is about the guy that gets that gets accused of something and then he takes a plea deal because he's afraid in order to stand before a jury trial because he don't want to get football numbers, right? This is about regular everyday people that are afraid because they know that they're about to get that lawyer that got them slip-ons on and he a public defender and he's saying, listen, just cop the plea, because you know what I'm saying? He facing them football numbers and he don't want to get convicted, even though it's a possibility that he probably or might have not even been guilty of that in the first place, right? And so I see the flaws on the outside looking in, working with a lot of these guys at the justice system. I see the trumped up charges that I see get thrown at men on a regular basis in order to get them to cop the pleas because they're throwing the book at them and they're facing life with the trumped up charges, and they're not trying to not see their kids or ever go home with the possibility of no parole. I see that on a regular basis. And so
I am 100%.
If we say that there's no bias
to trumped up charges, I agree with you. I think the state overcharges people all the time. I think that the issue in this particular case, and we can absolutely put it to rest because we're still on the first What the Bleep Person of the Week, is that he is now convicted, right? So we're going from the standpoint of his conviction, and the standard in order for him to have a new trial is there has to be new evidence. It has nothing to do with the court of public opinion, our theories on the case. It's whether or not something different than what occurred at the trial can be introduced in order for him to say, I should get a new trial. And they didn't introduce any new evidence.